This is Terry Allen. I am the Radical Progressive, and it is Monday, October 26, 2020. I am struggling with the idea that there is a lesser of two evils here when it comes to the presidential election. We are a little over a week away, and I still cannot come up with the lesser of two evils. I have been reading as much as I can. I have been listening to as many videos as I can, and I'm hearing both sides, and I still honestly cannot, in my good conscience, vote for either one of these clowns. I am very discouraged. I haven't done a video in about a week and a half. And the reason is because it seems to me as if we are in a no-win situation. I am worried for my family. I'm worried for this country. I am worried about our future. And I don't really see any good outcome no matter who gets voted in. We could very well end up with Biden and Harris, and we could end up, the Democrats could end up with a majority in the House and the Senate. But if we look at what happened in the first 4 years of Obama with Biden as his VP, they controlled the House, the Senate, and they still didn't do crap. They bailed out the banks. They allowed 5.1 families getting their homes foreclosed on. They gave trillions of dollars to the banks. And no, they weren't loans that got paid back. Okay, some of the initial loans were paid back with more gifts and more presents of trillions of dollars ended up going to the banks. And of course, not a single banker went to jail. It was a criminal operation. It was done specifically to make billions of dollars of profits. They knew exactly what they were doing. They had, with Joe Biden and Bill Clinton's help, they had managed to get Glass-Steagall canceled, which was the banking regulations that were put into place by Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And they knew exactly what they could do when that was canceled, and that allowed the financial houses to gamble with the business loans and the home loans, which they did. They repackaged them. They knew that they were underperforming. They were giving loans to anybody that was barely breathing, knowing that it didn't matter, because once everything crashed, once the bubble crashed and they got out with their money, then the whole thing would go down and the government would have to bail them out, because they already knew about this term too big to fail. So we already have a history of what the Democratic Party will do or won't do when they have a majority in the House and the Senate. So don't expect anything new, because we are in the same political motivations that we had back then. The Democratic Party was corrupt then. It's more corrupt now. It is for the 1% now. It was for the 1% back then. And the only thing that Obama probably got passed was the Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, which was a joke. The only good thing that came out of that was the insurance companies allowing for pre-existing conditions. But otherwise, it was a giant gift to the medical insurance industry. So, what I'm looking at is the history of Trump and Biden. I have been trying to figure out what these two clowns are for, what they might do, what they won't do, to try and figure out, is there a lesser of two evils here? And so far, I'm coming up with zero. There is no lesser of two evils here that I can see. Let's look at Trump. 4 years ago, Trump ran on a populist message, which he tapped into a lot of angry Americans that had been screwed by the Obama administration with Joe Biden as his VP. They had taken the two wars, Iraq and Afghanistan, and turned them into 7. They completely leveled Iraq. They destroyed Libya and created a Al-Qaeda-run state with open slave markets and hundreds of thousands dead. They backed the Saudi regime against Yemen. They put more troops in Afghanistan and Iraq. They did unbelievable war crimes. Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, and Obama are guilty of war crimes, just as George W. Bush and Donald Rumsfeld and Richard Pearl and the scumbags, the neocon scumbags that were running the Republican administration in the early 2000s, with W at the helm, which was more likely Cheney at the helm. And so we have a history of the situation. We can look back many, many years. We can look back and see what Joe Biden's record is. We don't have a long record of Trump. He was a horrible businessman. He's lost more money than probably anyone. He's deep in debt. His holdings, his real estate holdings are all losing money. Mar-a-Lago, I think, is probably the only one that's actually making money for him right now. The rest of them, he's going to have to sell off a lot of his properties to pay his debt when he gets out. The tax cut that he did, the $1.2 trillion tax cut for the 1%, which actually 85% of that tax cut did go to the 1%. And he can expect to rake in a lot of money when he gets out because of that bill that he passed, that he signed off on, which the Democratic Party signed off on as well. And they actually gave him I think it was $130 billion more in the military budget than he had asked for, which is ironic because the Democratic Party declares that Donald Trump is the most dangerous president. If you listen to Bernie Sanders, he's the most dangerous president in the history of America. Well, I think that George W. Bush was probably the most dangerous, and then Obama, because both sides were very corrupt. Obama was a puppet for the 1% in Wall Street, just like W was for the military-industrial complex. It's the same old story. It's the one-party system in this country. So let's look at the history. What we have with Trump is only the last 4 years and the things that he has done, which are terrible. He has maintained the wars. He has tried to get out of the wars, apparently. He backed off from Iran. He put huge, terrible sanctions against Iran. He backed out of the nuclear agreement that, oddly enough, that Obama administration had agreed to, which was actually a good thing. He backed out of that, put horrible sanctions on Iran. And if you want to sanction a country that is funding terrorism, then you should be sanctioning Saudi Arabia, because that is the country that is financing terrorism, not Iran, not any of the other countries, not Syria. So the other thing is that Trump ran on a populist message, which was that everyone needed health care. We need to bring back jobs to America. We need to make America great again. He talked about the wall, which was a ridiculous idea because we already have a wall. It's the poverty, the horrible poverty in Mexico, and Central America, which drives the illegal immigration into this country. That's what does it. Because these people are so desperate and poor that they would risk their lives to come across the border just to be able to eat regularly. So you've got the immigration situation, you've got COVID, you've got the lack of coherent policy. First they want to close things down, then they won't want to open everything up. The COVID infection rate is going back up again, particularly in red states, funny enough, because those are the states where the governors are trying to open up their economies prematurely. You have got the crippling sanctions against Venezuela. You have 100,000 more jobs have gone out of this country to the cheap labor pools, which are probably not China anymore. It's more likely that you're looking at Vietnam and Bangladesh and some of these other even poorer countries than China. You've got the situation with Syria, where we began to bomb them again. Under Obama, we actually ran out of bombs in Syria. We had Obama had actually bombed Syria and Iraq double the number of bombs that George W. Bush had dropped. So they're all war criminals. There's no doubt about that. But they all walk free, they all give speeches, they all write books, they all travel around in their Learjets, and they all hang out. They all hung out with the pedophile Jeffrey Epstein on his island, pedophile island. So they're all guilty. They're all very guilty. You've got the situation with the tariffs, which I actually agree with. Some tariffs are actually good. He is not applying the tariffs correctly. If he did, we would not have the situation with the farming industry. So it hasn't all been good. You've got, as I mentioned before, the $1.2 trillion tax cut for the 1%. There hasn't been very much that's been very good. Trump has talked about how he has funded black colleges. That's a good thing. I can't verify those numbers because he is a liar, just as Biden is a liar. And that's the odd thing about these two candidates, is that it's very difficult for them to attack each other on corruption because they are both corrupt. Biden's family has been enriched just as Trump's family has been enriched. The Chinese, the Communist Party there, the way they bribe politicians is they enrich the families, and it trickles down to the actual politician that they hope to bribe. And according to some of the emails from the hard drive that was taken from Hunter Biden's laptop, does show that Joe Biden, the big guy, as he's called, was making money from the family. It's being hidden. It's being funneled under the table. Hunter Biden would never have been able to get any of these jobs or make the kind of money if he had not had the last name of Biden. He's admitted to that. And he's probably still a crack addict from some of these photos that came off the hard drive. It appears that that's the case. It's appalling. It's appalling that the big tech is protecting Biden by trying to block the videos and the emails from the hard drive, trying to block them off of Twitter and Facebook. It's disgusting. It is a double standard. It is against the First Amendment, and it's just an abomination that big tech is allowed to do this. They are essentially trying to act as a utility with immunity from anything that's put up that's incorrect. because they don't have the ability to monitor everything. But now they are trying to censor. They are actually censoring things that they don't want to cause Biden trouble. So there goes your First Amendment. Trump is also prosecuting Julian Assange. He has not done much with Edward Snowden, but Snowden is still in Russia, hiding out. They are trying to extradite Julian Assange. The kangaroo court, the joke of a trial that he's in England, is an abomination. He is held in a plexiglass box at the back of the courtroom. He can barely hear what's going on. His defense team is not allowed to cross-examine any of the prosecution's witnesses. There's no justice. This is not justice. This is justice for the rich and powerful, the military-industrial complex. The irony here is that Julian Assange, as a journalist, has basically put up on the internet the evidence and emails pertaining to war crimes, corruption, the things that Hillary Clinton and the Clinton Foundation were doing, the war in Iraq, the war crimes and the torture that was going on, the corruption there, the inability for the generals in the military to even know why we're in Afghanistan. It's just the reason we are in there is for the military-industrial complex to make billions and billions of dollars. That's why we're there. So if they don't know why we're there, then they're idiots, because they do know why we're there. It's just that there's no strategic reason for us to be there except massive profits. So there's Trump's record. It's abysmal. It's terrible. His thing with his policies on COVID are back and forth. He's hopeless. But if we get Biden in, is anything going to get better or is it going to get worse? That's what you need to ask yourself, because we have a history of Biden. We know exactly what he stands for. We know exactly what he has pushed, the bills he's written, the things that he has tried to do. And let's start with his racism back in the 70s when they were discussing about busing and segregation issues. And he made a statement, which was in Business Week, uncovered last year, an article that he had basically said that if segregation is not done, if integration is not done correctly, he doesn't want his children to be going to school in a jungle. So we all know what that means. He is a blatant racist. Then you have the corruption of his family, the money that's been funneled to his family through different, like Afghanistan, with Ukraine and China. They have personally enriched themselves to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars, just as the Clinton Foundation enriched the Clinton family. So you've got major corruption going on. You've got the deep state that protects the Clintons and the Bidens. You have got the CNN and MSNBC and the other liberal media that has been protecting Biden, have been trying to block stories that are negative to his campaign. You have got Wall Street that love Biden. There's only one reason Wall Street will love Biden, is because they know, as he stated, nothing fundamentally will change. So, we've got NAFTA. Look at the devastation that NAFTA caused. Hundreds of thousands of American jobs lost when factories moved down to Mexico. The maquiladoras along the border, where the labor rates were an average of 57 cents an hour. You had horrible conditions down there where the pollution standards were much lower than they are here in the United States. The issues with the working class and the benefits that they get are non-existent. I've worked in Mexico. I have installed equipment in Mexico. I can tell you that it's a bad situation there for workers. I've spoken with the owners, and they seem to think that it's just fine to have dangerous situations where workers can get killed, and they just move the bodies out and bring in new workers. That's what they've actually told me. The bathrooms down there are unusable. Disgusting. I have never seen, I mean, I've been to the third world, but this is absolutely some of the most disgusting bathrooms I've ever seen. The situation in NAFTA created a huge unemployment problem in this country. In the 90s under Bill Clinton, that was pushed by Biden specifically, and it was sold to the American people as it was going to raise all boats. Well, it sunk all boats except for the 1% and the Wall Street banks, which made a killing. And the way they do that is when you move a factory to a cheap labor pool, and you can lay off all your American employees and hire cheap labor overseas, where you have much less regulations for pollution and benefits. The bankers and the CEOs and the board of directors and the stockholders can make a fortune. Meanwhile, American families are destroyed. Middle class is being destroyed. So when all those people ended up having to collect welfare and food stamps and unemployment, what did Biden do? He pushed the Welfare Act, which was a cutting of welfare programs, cutting of food stamp subsidies, cutting of all the social programs that were benefiting the poor and the unemployed. And then when you had desperate people turning to drugs, alcoholism, crime, then you had the crime bill pushed by Biden again, which ended up putting thousands and thousands of drug offenders, nonviolent drug offenders, in jail, in prison for the military, or for the prison industrial complex for cheap labor, which would be considered slave labor in essence, competing with our own industries here in this country. So every policy that Biden has pushed has been for Wall Street and the 1% and the banker class. He was a senator in Delaware, and he was known as the MBNA senator for that bank, which was one of the largest credit card issuing banks in the country. His son, Hunter Biden, got a job there. The crack cocaine addict got a job there. I don't think he even had to show up. But that's how corruption works. You had the Iraq War. He pushed and pushed for the Iraq War, and he's lied about it, saying that he was for it, but then later he was against it. But that's not true, because he has videos of him declaring that it was a good thing that we did and it was necessary. And we've probably killed nearly 1 million people in that country and created hundreds of thousands of refugees flooding Europe. It's an absolute disaster. It is criminal. It's war crimes that have been going on, and you can thank the George Bush and Cheney administration and Joe Biden personally for the disaster. Then you had the bankruptcy bill. The bankruptcy bill made it more difficult to go bankrupt. Well, personally, I had to file for bankruptcy after 2009 when the crash hit and wiped my business out. And what's interesting was it was more difficult to file. You cannot get out of your student loans with the new bankruptcy laws. And there's a class that you have to take, and you have to take a test. And it's interesting because The tests asked questions like, why did you go bankrupt? Was it because you couldn't control your spending? Was it because your credit card bills were out of control? Was it these different conditions that caused your bankruptcy? But there was not a single question in there about if you got screwed by the government or the Wall Street bankers bailout and the crashing of the economy that was allowed by the government. There was not a single question in there about that. One of the other tragedies in the bankruptcy bill was the fact that 5.1 million homes were foreclosed on. It made it very difficult for them to refinance, because once Wall Street was bailed out, then they shut down lending for a while, and it was an absolute disaster. There was this is just a typical story, is that Longo Toyota out here in the City of Industry in 2008 had sold 25,000 cars, and in 2009 they sold 12,000 cars. So their business was cut in half, and you can repeat that in nearly every industry in this country. The middle class was devastated. You had petty criminals and drug addicts going to jail, and not a single banker was indicted. Eric Holder, you can thank Eric Holder and Obama and Biden for that, because they basically had said, we want to look forward, not backwards. We don't want to indict war criminals in the Bush administration for lying us into an aggressive a war against Iraq and Afghanistan. Two countries that had nothing to do with 9/11. There was some training camps in Afghanistan. That's where Al-Qaeda came from. But that group was created by us as the Mujahideen back in the early 80s, late 70s, early 80s. And that turned into Al-Qaeda, and that was financed specifically by Saudi Arabia and the royal family in Saudi Arabia. So what did we do? We bombed Iraq back to the Stone Age, and not only did we kill nearly 1 million people there, but we destroyed countless unreplaceable ancient archaeological artifacts. That's where Sumerians came from, one of the first cultures that had writing. They were Babylon. There's many cultures that were started there, that had flourished there in the ancient past, that was just destroyed. It's a crime against humanity. It's comparable to the burning of the Library of Alexandria and the abomination, the crime against humanity there. The knowledge that was lost could never be regained. So there's the history of Biden. You've got Kamala Harris. She did not go after bankers, but she also loved putting petty criminals in jail, and even did not want to release prisoners that were released by the courts. She didn't want to do it because it would interfere with the prison labor industry. But she didn't put any bankers in jail. Mnuchin, who ran the One West Bank in California here, they estimated that there was 1,000 violations, felonies, and if they looked into it deeper, there would have probably been 2,000. But she called off that investigation, and Mnuchin went free, and now, of course, he is in the Trump administration. So there's the history of these two. Compare those to the history of Trump. If you think anything is going to get better, I know that Biden did say that he is for the $15 an hour minimum wage. However, he's absolutely against Medicare for all. He is against the debt relief for student loans. He is against free college. He is for war. He is wanting to pay back Russia and China and Iran for the unfounded, the charges that are unsubstantiated, that they have interfered with our elections. Apparently they got a hold of some voter registration rolls which are public, available to the public in any state that you want to go. So it doesn't look like that could have been any hack job. The situation with First Amendment rights, remember Kamala Harris in one of her last debates wanted to pull Donald Trump's Twitter account because of some of the things that he was saying. Well, there you go with First Amendment. She is not a friend of the First Amendment. So they are going after Assange. They are Snowden is in hiding. The federal government is going after the whistleblowers and the journalists. And what is the media? They stand back and do nothing. It's, they are going to come for you next. New York Times. So we are in dire straits. We are in a bad situation. Both parties right now have not given any kind of stimulus relief to the unemployed because they don't want either side to get credit for it. The Republicans are insanely worried about deficits now, and Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer don't want to vote on anything until after the election because they don't want Trump to get any credit for anything. So that is political corruption. That is appalling behavior. These corrupt politicians need to go. We need to primary them. We need to get them out. We need to sweep the Senate and the Congress clean and start over, in my opinion. The third party movement in this country is completely necessary. It's not soon enough because we can't do anything about this election this year, but we should be positioned very well in the next 2 years if we survive, if Biden doesn't get us into World War III, which is very likely they will do. The hard drive from Hunter Biden is, according to Biden and the Democrats and the so-called liberal media, they're not really liberal media. They are the 1%, owned by the 1%, with the agenda that protects the 1% and Biden, and are thumbing their nose at the First Amendment. They are protecting Biden, and they are trying to say that the revelations of Hunter Biden's hard drive is somehow a Russian plot. It's unbelievable that American people buy it. It's just hard to understand. We give Russia way too much credit. We, as the United States, the CIA, and the deep state, that's who's been interfering in elections. Look at the Democratic Party. Look what the DNC did back in 2016 to Bernie Sanders. If you want to talk about election fraud and election rigging, then you can look no further than the DNC and the RNC. The RNC has been systematically throwing off the black population off the voter rolls. So this country is corrupt to the core. The oligarchy that runs this country, that owns the politicians, have lost their mandate. They are no longer morally fit to run this country. They never were, but they are definitely not now. This whole system is rotting from the inside out. We are in a terrible situation with the American empire collapsing around the world. So what does an empire do when it begins to collapse? It lashes out and tries to wreak havoc on the world and will start a war if necessary. So that's what we're in for. So far, I do not have a lesser of two evils at this point. Maybe in a week and a half, or in a week, a little over a week, maybe I can come up with something. But for now, anything good that comes out of Biden's mouth is a lie, just as anything that comes out of Trump's mouth is a lie. So either way we go, we're screwed. I don't know what else to say. I'm going to sign off. I just hope that my American friends and family will consider these ideas and these thoughts about what's going on and where our country is headed. So it is once again Monday, October 26th, 2020. My name is Terry Allen, and I am the Radical Progressive, and I am for the third party. We need to join the People's Party movement. You need to go online and join. You need to start following the situation. We have got some really good people on board. We need to get progressives on board, and we need to take this country back from the oligarchy. So that's it for now. I will bring you another report once I have more information. All right. Have a good night. Thank you.